A timestamp. 1:47 a.m. That's when it stops. Not a power outage. Not a glitch. Not a loose wire or a dead battery. The security cameras inside a quiet Catalina Foothills home go completely dark, all of them, at the exact same moment. And they stay dark for exactly 41 minutes. 41 minutes where nothing is recorded. Nothing is seen. Nothing, officially, happens. But something did happen. Something very deliberate. Very controlled. And very, very wrong. We know this not because of what the cameras caught, but because of something far smaller. Something tucked quietly inside an elderly woman's chest. A device no one thought to silence. No one even considered. Her pacemaker was still running. And it recorded everything. This is the story of Nancy Guthrie. A woman whose home showed no signs of intrusion. Whose neighborhood was peaceful, upscale, low crime. Whose disappearance, on the surface, looked almost like nothing happened at all. Almost. Catalina Foothills, Arizona. Tucson's northern edge. This is the kind of neighborhood where people feel safe. Wide driveways. Well-lit streets. Security systems on every door. Manicured lawns. The kind of community where residents know their neighbors, where doors get locked out of habit rather than fear. Where crime feels like something that happens somewhere else, to someone else. Nancy Guthrie lived there alone. She was an elderly woman. Structured in her habits. Predictable in her rhythms. She slept at consistent hours. She moved through her home the same way, day after day. She was the kind of person whose routine was so stable, so regular, that any deviation would be immediately noticeable to anyone who knew her well. And on the night she disappeared, her home told a story of absolute normalcy. No broken locks. No shattered glass. No overturned furniture. No signs of struggle. No blood. No forced entry of any kind. The house was neat, ordered, undisturbed. The kind of stillness that, in another context, might feel like peace. It wasn't peace. When investigators first arrived, they weren't responding to a crime scene. They were looking for a missing person. Because there was no crime scene, technically. No visible evidence of violence. No immediate indication that anything had gone wrong inside those walls. And that right there, that cleanliness, was the first red flag. Because in genuine cases of accidental disappearance, things are often messy. There's context. There's disorder. Life leaves traces. But this scene had none of that. It was too clean. Too controlled. Too deliberate in the way it said absolutely nothing. Whoever had been in that house hadn't just left. They had managed the scene. And that distinction matters more than almost anything else in this investigation. Before she disappeared, Nancy had been with someone she knew. Her son-in-law. He had been at the house that evening. That wasn't speculation, it was confirmed. By neighbors who saw the car. By phone records. By the home's own security system log, which showed the front door opening and closing at hours that seemed unremarkable. Nothing alarming. Nothing that would make anyone look twice. He came. He stayed for a while. He appeared to leave. The evening continued. Nancy's home was quiet. Interior lights cycled off gradually, the normal wind down of a normal night in a normal household. Then came 1:47 a.m. Every camera in the house goes silent. All of them. At the same instant. With no error logged. No warning indicator. No system alert. Now let's be clear about something. Security systems fail. Cameras glitch. Power fluctuates. These are real things that happen in real homes. But when a system fails due to a technical fault, it rarely fails across every device simultaneously with perfect, synchronized precision. Technical failures are messy. They're inconsistent. They leave logs. They leave traces of whatever caused them. This left nothing. This was not a malfunction. This was access. Someone who knew the system. Someone who understood its layout, its controls, its weaknesses. Someone who had spent enough time inside that house to know exactly what to disable and exactly when to do it. No alarm was triggered. Because the system wasn't broken. It was paused. Investigators came to call it the critical window. 1:47 a.m. to 2:28 a.m. 41 minutes with no digital record. No camera feed. No motion sensor activity. No timestamps tracking movement through the house. 41 minutes that, on paper, simply do not exist. In most cases, an absence of data is neutral. Nothing recorded means nothing happened. But absence of data in a context like this, surrounded by deliberate system shutdown, no forced entry, a missing person, that absence becomes its own kind of evidence. You have to ask, why 41 minutes? Why not a fault that lasts 2 hours, or resolves in 30 seconds? Why a specific, contained window? Why something that begins at a precise time and ends at a precise time, leaving everything before and after intact? Because it was timed. Someone created that gap on purpose. Someone calculated how long they needed, and then they took exactly that long. Not a minute more than necessary. And inside that gap, inside that manufactured silence, something happened to Nancy Guthrie. But here is where this case takes a turn that no one expected. Because in the rush to create a clean, invisible window, whoever did this overlooked something. They couldn't shut off Nancy's heart. Nancy Guthrie had a cardiac pacemaker. Most people don't think much about pacemakers. They're small. Quiet. They sit beneath the skin, regulating heartbeat, monitoring rhythm. In older models, they were relatively simple devices. But modern pacemakers, the kind Nancy had, are different. They don't just regulate. They log. Continuously and automatically. Every spike in cardiac activity. Every irregular rhythm. Every acceleration, every collapse, every moment the heart deviates from its baseline pattern. They record timestamped biological data. And unlike a security camera, that data cannot be reached from a control panel. It cannot be accessed remotely by someone who doesn't have medical credentials and physical possession of the device. It cannot be paused, overwritten, or reset from the outside. It just runs. Silently. Faithfully. Doing its only job. When investigators obtained Nancy's pacemaker records, the data confirmed what the camera blackout had tried to conceal. Inside that 41-minute window, during the very period the cameras had been silenced, the device registered a period of extreme cardiac distress. A sudden, severe disruption to normal biological function. The kind of event that doesn't happen in a sleeping person during a peaceful night. The timestamps were exact. The data was unambiguous. The pacemaker had recorded what no camera was allowed to see. And between those two narratives, one staged, one biological, one that could not be altered by human hands, the truth was beginning to surface. Investigators began building the timeline backward from the forensic data. The pacemaker placed the critical biological event squarely inside the camera blackout window. That alignment was not coincidental. It meant the cameras had been shut down specifically to cover a window of action, and the action happened exactly when it was supposed to, exactly within the time that had been carved out for it. That is not improvisation. That is premeditation. No forced entry confirmed insider access. A key, or a code, or both. Intimate knowledge of the locks. The security system. The layout of the rooms. The habits of the woman who lived there. That kind of knowledge doesn't come from watching from a distance. It comes from being invited in, repeatedly, over time. From being trusted. No signs of struggle pointed to a controlled encounter. This is a detail people often misread. They assume a clean scene means nothing violent occurred. That's not always true. A clean scene can mean the person who created it was calm enough, prepared enough, and experienced enough to maintain control from beginning to end. That takes a particular kind of coldness. And then, at 2:28 a.m., 41 minutes after the blackout began, the digital systems resumed. The cameras came back online. The logs continued forward as if uninterrupted. As if the last 41 minutes had simply never existed. To any first glance, the scene was clean. But investigators don't take first glances. They take everything. Here is what the evidence, assembled and placed in order, begins to say. Someone with insider-level access, someone who understood the house's systems, knew the layout, and was familiar with Nancy's routines, disabled the cameras at a specific hour. They used the resulting window deliberately and efficiently. They maintained control of the scene throughout. They exited without triggering a single alarm. The last confirmed person at that house was Nancy's son-in-law. Investigators did not rush to a conclusion. That's not how rigorous investigations work, and it's not how this one proceeded. What investigators did was lay every piece of data on the table and ask the question that evidence always demands, given only what we know, not what we feel, not what we assume, who fits inside this timeline? Who had system access? Who knew the house well enough to disable its cameras without a trace? Who had been confirmed at the location that very night? Whose presence, when placed against the forensic data, created not a contradiction, but a pattern? The camera blackout required knowledge or proximity. The absence of forced entry required trust. The pacemaker data confirmed a critical event during the manufactured silence. And the last verified presence at that address pointed in a direction that was becoming harder and harder to ignore. The investigation continued. Evidence was gathered, cross-referenced, examined. But the data, cold, impartial, immune to explanation, was already telling its story. A timestamp. 1:47 a.m. That's when it stops. But you know now that isn't when everything stopped. That's when someone wanted you to believe everything stopped. That's when the cameras went dark and the silence was supposed to begin, a silence designed to last exactly as long as it needed to, and then disappear. What they didn't account for was the quiet, indifferent persistence of a small device doing its only job. Recording. Logging. Marking every second with biological truth that no access code could reach. Nancy Guthrie's house was still that night. Perfectly, deliberately still. A scene managed so carefully that it almost read as peaceful. But the data remembered. And that's what this case ultimately comes down to. Not what someone wanted the world to see. Not the carefully manufactured emptiness of 41 missing minutes. But the simple, relentless arithmetic of a machine, logging a heartbeat, marking a time, holding onto a truth that no one thought to erase. Because you can disable cameras. You can control a scene. You can walk out of a house and leave it looking like nothing happened. You can build a silence and step inside it and believe, for 41 minutes, that you are invisible. But you cannot turn off the evidence you forgot was running. Data doesn't lie. People do.